Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean or just simply Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And I feel like I forgot to mention somebody pretty important. Dean, who else do we have with us today?
Well, we're here to talk to none other than the prolific Bruce Cordell, currently with Monte Cook Games. And honestly, this man needs little introduction. His body of work alone at MCG is a testament in of itself. So without further pomp and circumstance, I give you Bruce Cordell.
Hey
Welcome
guys,
to the show, Bruce.
thank you for having me aboard. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Bruce. I've been writing RPG material and fiction material for over 20 years, and if you do that full time, it turns out that over just math works out that you produce a lot of material. So I've done that.
First off, Bruce, welcome to the CU. We're so honored to have you here. This is great. We've been geeking out all week about this, so happy to have you on the show. And it's a little understatement when you said your catalog is enormous, not to mention all the Origins Awards, Emmys, second edition D&D, it's pretty extensive. But can you tell us a little bit of how you got into in the gaming industry and what led you to working with Monte Cook Games?
Well, it kind of goes all the way back to the fact that in 8th grade, I was creating this little leather coaster as a, I don't know, probably, yeah, coaster. And I had a cross sword and a cross axe, right? And this kid came up to me and said, "Do you play D&D?" And this was like in the early 80s. And that kid turned out to be Monte Cook. And we became fast friends, and we've been friends ever since. So he got into gaming before I did, being published. And when I was still in college, he got a job working at Arcana Enterprise, and he would always say to me, "You should write something. You could probably, I can get it published here at Iron Crown." I was like, and after a while he kind of wore me down, and he did get me published, and I got a couple credits through them. Meanwhile, I went off and got a degree in biology, and I'd been working in a genetics lab. I ended up getting a job in a genetics lab, and these computers in the early 90s, were just on the fledgling internet, and I found these multi-user muds and mushes that were text-based. Basically it was like Zork, except it was a multi-user and you could run onto other people, but it was all text. And I figured out I would love those things, and I was able to get on the internet because my job had these computers. They're supposed to be using it to program RNA and DNA sequences for synthetic runs, but when they weren't doing that, apologize, my dog's pill medication's going off there. She needs try to spill. I was able to program those, and basically I was hired at TSR to do that, to create a D&D version of a mud or mush. So I left my job in that biology industry to do that. And for whatever reason, the owner of the company at the time was like, "Yeah, the internet's a fad." This is still, it was 1995 when I actually went out there. And so we didn't do that. And I was like, "Well, I just quit my job. What am I going to do?" And they're like, "Well, you can, there was this other guy named Bruce. I can't remember his last name now. There's like a couple different Bruces. He just left. Why don't you take up and write on the core D&D team?" I'm like, "All right."
Why not?
The first thing they hired me to write was the Gates of Firestorm, and that turned out really well, and so they kept me employed.
It's funny. Before, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dean.
I was just saying it's a proven fact that everybody we seem to talk to is some sort of scientist or tech head, and we're all D&Ders as well. We like to write and create. I just think it's hilarious. Your biology, Sean talked about his background. It's just great. So awesome.
I was looking at the other way, like when we interviewed Jeff D. It seems that early TSR, they just mix and match people to positions. Well, hey, why don't you join the regular core D&D team? It's similar to what they did with Jeff D.
Yeah.
But real quick though, We did get a brief little bit of your history, but how did you get your foot in the door with Monte Cook Games specifically? Like, what was like your first project with them, or like how did Monte approach you by writing for them, or like how did it go down?
Well, you probably know that Monty had an earlier company named Malhavoc Press,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so during the third edition era, which was 2000 on, that's when Malhavoc Press launched, and I was still working at TSR/Wizards of the Coast. They changed the name, and I was able to do freelance for Malhavoc Press. He invited me to write a couple projects for that, and that's kind of how I guess I got my foot in the door. Although Malhavoc Press went away, and Monty didn't reincorporate until after had already been working on fifth edition. I mean, Monty, Rob Schwalb, and I were the for a little while we were the core fifth edition team, right? And so we worked very closely together. And when he left and then started, Numenera, I stayed with the team a little bit longer. But I had been finding that I didn't have as much autonomy as I was used to having for all the previous years of my experience writing. And I wanted, and also I'd been writing fiction a lot. And the Wizards of the Coast, through various, through all of it, for whatever reason, their publishing department went away. And I was no longer able, whether I wanted to or not, to write fantasy novels, which was kind of where I'd still been able to find almost complete autonomy, which I really enjoyed. And so I started writing. I figured I would quit Wizards, write a science fiction novel, and that would be great. And who knows, maybe I'd end up working for some other game company later, but I was going to focus on this novel. Anyway, I was telling Monty about my novel, and he said, well, we could probably write a really great game based on that idea. So why don't you come work at MCG, and we'll write a game based on it. And that game, of course, was The Strange. I didn't finish the novel until like 2 years after that. After The Strange was published, and Myth of the Maker finally came out. So yay! It was kind of a long circle. So that was in 2013 that I left Wizards of the Coast, and The Strange came out in 2014. Alpha Dean has a copy of Myth of the Maker.
Yes.
A hardcover copy.
A very shiny copy. But that kind of leads very neatly into our next question. So The Strange, right? Big fish. Everybody talks about it, everybody loves it. It's often discussed and run on our server, Cypher Unlimited. And there was a lot of discussion going on when it was announced that Cypher system would be absorbing most of the Strange stuff. Are there any plans in the future to produce any additional stuff for The Strange? And as a side note, do you plan to write any novels based in the setting like Myth of the Maker?
Well, I guess I'll say there's no, concrete plans to do any of those things. That said, it's something that I love The Strange, and I wouldn't put it off the table, right? I wouldn't say no, I'll never be doing something like that again, because you never know. So, but there's no concrete plans like right now to say yes, in 2 months there'll be something, or in the 6 months or whatever. But can't really talk about too much into the future.
Gotcha. But you personally though, any story ideas or anything might be lingering in the back of your mind for a novel? I know I'm kind of fishing for your ideas, but
Bruce, you gotta understand.
Oh sure, Bruce, I have a couple of novel ideas, both for Numenera and The Strange, but I actually have started 2 other completely unrelated novels, one of which I've kind of just set on the sideline, and another that I'm slowly kind of working forward on. I'm used to writing between 500 and 700 or more words a day on a novel that I have a deadline for, in addition to my RPG writing. It's harder to write that many words a day when you don't actually have a deadline when you're writing on total but I'm trying to write at least 200 or 300 words a day, 5 days a week anyway. So it's going a lot slower. Once I have that finished, who knows what'll happen?
You got to understand.
Is going to have first dibs. I'll say that because
Strange
ended up working out really well for me.
I'll tell you what, Bruce. That's actually inspirational to me, being a writer myself. I hopefully one day will be able to do that for a living myself. So. Very inspirational statements there. So appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah.
finding that time and that personal drive to even just eke out. Sometimes, if I can just even touch the file and, make a few, changes or read through a previous chapter and be like, oh, right. That's better than nothing, right? Because the longer you walk away from it,
The harder to come back.
you may never come back, right?
You were about to say something, Anthony?
Yeah, I was just going to tell Bruce that you got to understand that strange questions are very common on our server. So we definitely had to ask if there was anything else coming down the pipeline.
Understood.
Yeah.
I would have been like, why didn't they ask about the strange crime?
So, we were talking about the strange, but that is a perfect segue into your new setting. The stars are fire. And you know what? Let me rephrase that. The new toolkit that you bring into the forefront. Why did you choose to design this game? And is there any differences with this versus other sci-fi settings that are going to be out there? Any new mechanics or optional rules for running sci-fi that you could tell us about that might be included?
Right. Well, there's a lot of questions in there. Let's see. So you are right. It is both a toolkit and a new IP, right? Because the last like 35-40% of the book is kind of a new hard science fiction setting. It takes place about 250-ish years in our future. So that is a complete, ready to run setting with a couple adventures ready to go. So there's one adventure set right in the setting, and then a couple more just kind of generic Cypher short sort of adventures that are science fiction, just to kind of give you a taste of that. So so right now science fiction has kind of seeing this renaissance with all these movies with Ad Astra and Expanse and I don't know, I just feel like science fiction is kind of enjoying this new resurgence in popular culture. For me, science fiction has never left the limelight. It was something I always read.
Great.
And yes, I liked fantasy, and yes, I worked for TSR. But what I read, I've been a prolific reader of science fiction my entire life. I love it. And when the opportunity came to write a book about science fiction, to kind of explore the concept from an RPG side, or honestly, a setting. Anyone writing a science fiction setting might get something useful out of this. And I tried to approach the book from the point of view of like, well, you have basically there's three broad tech levels in science fiction. There's a contemporary setting, like we're in the real world right now and something weird happens, right? That's contemporary and it's beyond our technology, but you're in a contemporary setting. Then there's the advanced setting, which is kind of the hard science fiction things, where we can use our modern day understanding of science and extrapolate it and come to some sort of understanding. And there's some examples of that kind of science fiction. The Expanse, if you're familiar, is kind of the most example of that. And there's other many movies. We're going to Mars movies, and I haven't actually seen Ad Astra yet, although I've heard of the premise, right? So I know there's always a little bit of a jump, and then there's the fantastic, and that's just like, yeah, we've got gravity on our ships, yeah, we go faster than light, we don't really explain it, it's it's laser swords in space, it's
right,
it's Star Wars, right? Whatever, and Star Trek, honestly, but it all has a place, and I tried to give kind of cover it from all these perspectives, so allow you to kind of weave together whatever setting you're looking for. I feel like you asked me one other. You said, is there any kind of rule systems in there that would be interesting? There are a few. There's a lot of rules modules I tried to bring in, from transhuman options to dealing with AI. And one of the things I really wanted to touch on and explore, and we ended up playtesting this, was spacecraft combat.
Oh,
A lot of people are going to be happy about that.
Here, Bruce.
I'm really happy. We play tested the system a couple different times to try and nail it down. And one of the biggest, so I need to props to where they're due. I had this conversation, and oh my gosh, my memory is leaking away, with Eric Campbell, and oh my gosh, I need to look on Twitter to to pull up these names, and I'm gonna look this up in the background. People who did the Shield of Tomorrow, a couple of people do the Shield of Tomorrow, and then they ended up doing Calypso 6, which is a live game. Eric Campbell runs it, and one of his players who's just fantastic, and I feel so bad because I hung out with her at Gen Con. Anyway, I will look that up in a second so I can give proper. Anyway, I had this conversation with them, and they said their biggest problems when they were running the Shield of Tomorrow was that spacecraft combat kept running into these sorts of problems where, well, I guess I shoot again, right? And I wanted to, based on that conversation, I kind of wanted to use the Cypher system, kind of bring in some of the way the Cypher system works and allow anyone on a spacecraft to like be able to have something to do that wasn't always the same thing. So there was a choice they could be making if they were involved in StarCraft combat, basically bridge combat in some fashion. They could contribute, if they could decide what they wanted to do, and they could try and do something a little risky too for a greater reward, but an additional greater potential bad thing happening as well. So the spacecraft combat really got a good touch in the Stars Are Fire.
Excellent.
Nice.
I have a question. Will you have options for both, like dog fighting, similar to like X-Wing, Star Wars,
And capital ship combat?
Yeah, and Admiral ship combat. Full crews. Would there be a difference?
The system handles both those levels of combat. So yes, but it is also a Cypher system combat system. So there's some level of abstraction as well, right? I mean, I'm not creating. There are no minis in this game, right? So we're not getting to that level of nitpickiness. We're abstracting a lot of this, but yes, it goes from, if you wanted to, the system will handle you taking your biplane up and, a StarCraft coming down. I mean, the biplane is going to be destroyed, but it handles or a much bigger ship or a capital ship, and there's different, like I said, there's contemporary craft, there's advanced craft, and then there's fantastic craft, right? And they can all be in the same combat if you so choose. And so that's very exciting.
Yeah, that is.
We actually love the fact that you said that, Bruce. I mean, like I said, that's like Anthony said, that's been such a great, grievous conversation with people on the server, and just whenever you talk to anybody. So I think we're all pretty happy with that answer. Looking forward to it. So
I guess I'll move on to the next question. Here's the part where we took questions from members of our server. We actually had a lot of submissions. I think it was over 55 submissions, and we had to narrow it down to 4. So, it was pretty hard work. But our first question is from a member called Frunk. I hope I did not butcher your name. If I did, I apologize. But I quote, with just over 40 years after its inception, we have seemed to enter the golden age of role-playing games. As someone who's been involved from almost the beginning, he's really aging you there, Bruce.
Maybe he's talking about himself.
How do you feel about this? And did you ever think role-playing games would get this mainstream?
I guess, no one ever really sees this sort of thing coming when they're, in part of it. None of us probably did, right? When we were playing however many years ago, we were just caught up in it. And if you're my age, which is, I was playing, I guess I probably started playing in the late 70s, in my Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts before I met into high school. So yes, I guess I was just part of RPG playing first edition in the late 70s, but kind of like, computers or any sort of thing that starts off like just very small. Well, computers start off really big and no one could ever have one, but after 40 or 50 years, right, it's like we're having this conversation now on this computer and it's part of every aspect of our life, right? And I guess I could see that RPGs being, hindsight being 2020, that as exciting and as engaging and as much as they're able to engage the imagination for almost anyone who gives them a shot, I guess we could say, yes, of course it was going to become this big. And it was probably the thing that really lit the fire of that was Critical Role, I would imagine, right? I seen people like just who you would never think about they'd ever consider playing an RPG, be like, well, I would like to play some Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's great, and I'm glad that this sort of network effect has been building over all these decades.
Do you think that just a side question? Do you think that it's gonna peak at one point, or it's gonna keep on rising? Because right now it's definitely moving up.
I think that these things kind of go in pendulum swings, so I can't speak to where it will end up going. I feel like there's this constant sort of desire from people who are interested in speaking of computer technology, to kind of bring this experience in, and all of us probably enjoy certain types of games that are very RPG inspired, right now. And I think that eventually these games will be mediated a lot more by VR experiences. I ended up getting the Oculus Quest, which is kind of a VR rig that doesn't connect to any wires at all, right? It's completely free for my partner Tora, and it's amazing, right? It's and I use it too now.
Well, why not?
It's just the ability just to put it on and suddenly be transported to this other world. I mean, it's a basic set, but you see where this is going. You can see where this technology, the VR technology, is going, and combining that with what we do, RPGs. Who knows, right?
Definitely some interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
I would love to see Numenera on VR. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I think a lot of people would pay for that experience, quite honestly.
Someone with those skills out there, and they want to, approach Charles Ryan with licensing.
You heard it here first, fellas. Let's get Numenera VR alive. But going forward, though, so our next question is from Jest or Burst of Hope from the Discord server, or you might know her on Twitter or whatever have you. She's a big voice in the community. Her question is, are there any unpublished The Strange recursions you wish to talk about, or maybe some that you have squirreled away and never got to the chance to put in a book? But yeah, that's what she's curious about.
No. I mean, we created a lot of material for The Strange. I don't know if it was the most recent book, but Worlds Numberless and Strange. There were like 11 or 12, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, like kind of full-on chapters of new recursions that I put a lot of effort into each one of those, and each one of those by the time I finished writing, I was like, I could write a 3-novel series based on this. Okay, on to the next one. And that could be done again, right? But if I were to return to The Strange, I could imagine taking something along that appeared in Worlds Numberless and Strange and developing that further. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'd do something completely different and new. I mean, in the way that anytime we create a new Cypher system, standalone thing, like I did Stars Are Fire, and the IP in that is called The Revel. And The Revel could easily be, of course, a new Strange system, because that's the beauty of The Strange. It's almost too open-ended, right? And I think that's what's finally the Cypher system kind of grew up out of the Numenera and the Strange together, and the Strange being so open-ended, it was just perfectly perfectly anything we created could be a Cypher system game or a Strange game.
I don't know if we saw, but we did a video on our favorite books, non-core books of MCG, and World's Numberless and Strange was my favorite.
Oh, was it? Oh, thank you.
And mine was Gods of the Fall. So.
And I'm the only one who ever picked a different author.
Picked what?
I'm the only one who here who picked a different author. Mine was
Predation
by Shadow Germain. Yeah, awesome. I love it.
Fantastic choice. Yeah, Gods of the Fall was another one of those books I spent a lot of time on, right? And thought about how it could be, a Strange recursion as well. But of course, its own thing. I mean, once you're in that world, right, you could imagine that these alternate dimensions, maybe the Gods of the Fall universe is the core dimension, right? And it just depends on whatever perspective you want to apply to your game.
Gods of the Fall is just so brilliant, and it was engrossing. The world itself felt as a living, growing evolutionary, creature in of itself. So
Always gonna whip
yeah.
it out.
Yeah, it's
My copy should be behind me too, but
mine are right there, right there on the shelf.
Yeah, when this book came out, and there was a lot of things about it. You're saying it's engrossing and stuff. Thank you. But a lot of the things that kind of came together for this book were Bear Whiter's art direction and a new cover. We had a new cover copy artist, first time ever use his services. He also did a lot of the interior of the art, which is Lai Sessiowan. Not sure how to pronounce it for sure, but he did this, and just the layout and the art, just kind of came together with the material. I think in a way just to make it like, can I eat this book? I would eat this book.
Yeah. right. That's what I'm saying. It was awesome.
I'm laughing because I actually find myself saying that about a lot of Monte Cook Games products. Or like, especially the new Cypher core book. When I got, it's like I feel like I could eat this. Like this is so nice.
Yeah, the Cypher core rulebook is beautiful too. But we could talk about this stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I just have it all here because I use it as a resource. It's all,
right, definitely. But we're gonna move on to our next question, and this is from one of our members named Ripster Shadow, and he says, "What's your creative process when you start designing a new project?"
Well, hopefully I can get some leeway on it. Hopefully I can get a month or two, kind of know about it in the back of my head while I'm working on a previous product. Because that way I can just kind of let it go. Oh, all right, I'm going to be working on, Voices of the Datasphere or something like that. And or Gods of the Fall, I had like 3 months leeway, and I was able to, just kind of, tool around with ideas. I could talk to different people. Like my partner Tora is also, she loves science fiction and fantasy, so I'm able to talk to her about these sorts of things, get some ideas from her. And of course, also the MCG design team is a fantastic resource. And at some point, I will take whatever I have, if I've had this time, and we'll sit down and we'll just brainstorm, right? And when we write a product, sometimes we're the sole author on a thing like The Stars Are Fire, The Gods of the Fall. And then, of course, we are the lead as well because we're the sole author. Other times, there's multiple authors, 1 or 2 or 3 authors on a thing, and then there's someone who's designated lead, just so there's someone to make sure things don't fall through the cracks, right? And that person isn't responsible for doing all the brainstorming by any means, but they are responsible for setting up a brainstorming meeting with the full design team, which is Monty, Sean, and Shauna. I make a joke that I'm Sean Dar because of Sean. We need another Sean. Only Sean Dar. But anyway, and often these brainstorming meetings, something really magical can come out of it, especially if we can kind of come in with the seed of an idea. So it's better to have a little bit going in. Like Voices of the Datasphere is a product that a couple of us, Sean Reynolds and I, are working on currently. And that was something that was like, well, we have some ideas. We kind of know what we're going to do, right? Because we had to have something, we had to have something we knew that we could develop into something great in order to have the Kickstarter. Yeah. But actually having that actual first brainstorming session where we're going, here's the kind of things we want to do, is like, oh, this is really great. This is very exciting. So that's in a very broad strokes how the creative thing works. Yeah, you got to spend the time. Magical ideas aren't going to just fall into your head. You might have a few ideas in the shower after you work out or something, but you actually then have to sit and spend some time thinking about it, right? And writing down some things, crossing out some things, and actually just trying to work forward. I don't know. It's an interesting. I know why people ask these questions, like how does your creative process work? But it's just spending the time thinking about it ultimately, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You can be inspired by other things, right? If there's lots of things you really like, I think that's like really important. In fact, if you read 10 science fiction books or you see 10 science fiction movies or fantasy or whatever, right? There's some conglomeration, there's some synthesis of things there that will come of all part. I understand this part, I understand this part. But when these two things come together in this way, well, that's new, right? And that's different. and that's also great. That's how creativity also happens.
Yeah, that's definitely a difficult question to answer because everyone has a different creative process.
And sometimes
I mean-
it is difficult to nail down exactly what sparks it or what gets you driving forward. But what you did mention is, I mean, I can't speak for Anthony or Dean, but definitely when I'm watching or reading something, I'm like, oh, hey, what if this character or this like setting element happened in this other setting or something like that? I'm like, oh, and then that's how my story ideas get sparked. But yeah, different strokes for different folks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the same for most people. I think, the things they see, experience, will drive forward because, just like we're talking about that, I just watched that Will Smith movie and it gave me great ideas for some adventures, and now the Cypher shorts gives me even better ideas on how to approach things.
Let's move on to the next question. I know we have limited time here. This question is from Long Live Leroy Kane. He says your D&D 3.5 terrain books remain one of the best things to come out of the revised 3rd edition. Have you guys considered creating something similar for Numenera?
The terrain books, did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, he said your D&D 3.5 terrain books.
Well, it's possible I've forgotten or just not getting that reference. Is there any follow-up that we can ask first? Like, what's an example of a terrain book? Is like the Underdark or that sort of thing? Like,
Let me see if I can find anything.
Was there a 5e, a 3.5 terrain book?
I guess I'm not sure what a terrain book means. Like, I need an example of a title to know what that means exactly. Like, I don't know what that means because I keep my mind going to difficult terrain. I don't think that's what they mean.
Yeah, I could definitely.
I'm looking here.
Let's see.
Maybe the Sunless Citadel stuff? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, to make it easier,
Yeah.
I guess it's would you guys consider making a Numenera book that's basically similar to like how Jade Colossus would be? It's a different settings of like obstacles, maybe maps, something like of that example. Because I am a little confused with the terrain as well.
Well, we are always interested in finding new angles on how to present Numenera, right? I would not rule anything out if it's a cool idea, if it strikes us as something that could benefit play experience, then sure, right? And having, I don't want to go off and say what a terrain book is, but having a bunch of weird places, I mean, that's kind of what we do on a regular basis. We like to have a theme, usually. Jade Colossus obviously was a theme, but of course then it became its own, like, create any weird random Numenera dungeon anywhere using this 35-page random Numenera dungeon generator, right? I mean,
I think a lot of people use Jade Colossus for non-Numenera games as well.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping people would.
Most
right?
definitely.
It was a love letter to the first edition DMG random dungeon generator in the back.
Yeah, it definitely was.
I've definitely seen people talk about just using it, like, not even for a game, they're just like reading it and generating dungeons. That's what they enjoy doing. Definitely seen a few people say something like that.
Awesome.
But
I apologize, Leroy, if we weren't able to answer your question correctly. But after you watch this video, I could more than happy to send Bruce an email and maybe he'll get back to me with it if we misspoke on your question.
But with what you guys were saying though, with the the random obstacles or whatever have you, it sounds like a perfect idea for a deck of stuff. That's an awesome idea for something to think about. I mean, honestly, that's something I would enjoy. It's like, hey, I need a obstacle for a scene. Boom, there it is. But either way, that concludes our fan base questions. So thank you so much for answering those. And we'll move. We'll keep the ball rolling with the stuff we got in store for you from us. So yeah, with Monte Cook Games' successful Arcana of the Ancients Kickstarter, you guys are porting over Numenera to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Can you speak about the challenges from a design perspective about converting Numenera over to D&D? And were there any particular Cypher system mechanics that you feel didn't really work right in 5e or didn't really fit too well?
Well, the biggest challenge is that the Cypher system is a more abstract system in some ways, and there are things that you depend upon the GM to do that 5th edition relies on dice. One of the biggest things is that the Cypher system has this elegance where the level encodes a lot of information. If you're talking about a creature, it encodes its damage, its attacks, its defense, its hit points. If you're talking about an object, how effective the object is and how the level of each of these things. If you know the level of two different things, you know how they interact, right? I mean, that's the basic system. And then everything else that comes out of that is when that diverges from the level. That's how you write up a creature, right? And you give it special abilities. But in 5th edition, and most previous versions of D&D, that's not true. Things are kind of more, you throw them together. I don't want to say throw them together, but things fall within ranges, but there's lots of different ranges that things will fall into. And so the challenge used to be called CR in 3rd edition, the challenge rating, the challenge in 5th edition, the number kind of gives you this big wide range of strengths for creatures or objects, DCs for making saving throws, all that kind of thing. And where Numenera, the Cypher system has 3 core, might, speed, and intellect. We have the 6 classic abilities in Dungeons & Dragons. So I would say there's just a lot more going on in 5th edition, and it requires a lot more attention to detail. 5th edition isn't as strict as some of the previous editions to that regard, thankfully. Yay. You hopefully helped push that when we were part of the team, and we did. And it was so in that sense it wasn't as nitpicky as it could have been, but things are done certain ways, that things are done in a certain way in 5th edition, whereas things are done in a certain way in the Cypher system too, but there's more of that. And so to kind of change the language over and change the way of thinking over, it took a while. Like when it started doing ciphers, it's like, oh, how does this work? What are the DCs at this challenge? And what are the various things? And what are ciphers? What are artifacts? Can't use that term because artifacts has a meaning in 5th edition. What are cybernetics? Don't want to use that term because that's a modern day system. What term are we going to use for that? And how does that work? Okay, how creatures, right? So you go into that and it just takes a while. And at first you're like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. We're not gonna have time. But once you get into it, once you start converting, you're like, okay, I understand how this works now. Things move a little bit more quickly, thankfully. And we've actually finished, Sean and I also worked together on the first book in that series, the Arcana of the Ancients itself, which is just like, here's weird stuff happening in your D&D campaign. The Ancients have returned. And we start off with an adventure called The Hills of Crooked Sleep, which introduces it to your campaign if you just want to use it, right? And then the rest of the book is, here's all the other stuff, right? That you might use in your D&D campaign. So I think people are going to like it. It certainly is awesome and great to write. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how ciphers translate to 5e, if it still has that same feel of that one-time use magical or fantastical effect.
Hopefully. It should. Yeah. I mean, it's a rule that I mean that's the rule, right? So if people want to use it in the same way as they are in Numenera, that's the intent. So they
Pretty cool.
are trying to accumulate too many. They may face the same sorts of repercussions as they would in Numenera as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very exciting.
So, yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. Lots of fun. But I have a question. Because my favorite non-book setting was Gods of the Fall. So let's talk about that. Can you tell me a little bit about what was the inspiration behind it? And are you planning to revisit any of the original worlds of the Cypher system, Kickstarter?
Okay, well, so the first, remind me of the second question again. So the first, after I get, so the Gods of the Fall, it was kind of I actually had a lot of time because at one point Monty was like, hey, if you could write anything you wanted to write, why don't you write that? Whatever it wants to be. And I was like, oh, that's a wide open question. I don't know. Whatever setting you want, if it's science fiction, fantasy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, Strange was sort of science fiction. Maybe I should veer into fantasy. This was a few years ago now, right? And so I decided fantasy, but I wanted to have a different take on fantasy. I wanted to do something that kind of reflected a post-apocalyptic fantasy world where characters could pick up the pieces of shattered, this existence and become gods themselves because they are the gods. And it's kind of slowly developed into what it became from small little ideas well, if they're gods, it'd be great if they could play gods. When I was a kid, in high school, me and one of my other friends would pick up the original D&D's deities and demigods and just have God. We'd each pick a god and we'd have god battles, right?
Yeah.
And they'd go all night because and 2 hours summoning, and he would, and sometimes they come down to a single. Yes.
One of the few D&D books I actually own.
So I've always liked that, but of course, a little bit more refined and a little bit more coming from a dark place, right? So in a dark fantasy. So that's kind of where the inspiration came for Gods of the Fall. Just I wanted to write characters that could become gods.
And it works. It really works. I've played. Gods of the Fall. Just so you know, Bruce, it's inspired all sorts of different things. I've set it up with modern times, where the gods came back and were opening gateways to the Elysian field, so the other gods could escape the hunters. It was a lot of fun. So trust me, you did your job. You did it well.
Awesome.
But the second part of the question was, are you guys planning on revisiting any of the original worlds of the Cypher system?
Oh, like Predation or Gods of the Fall,
right?
Or Masked. No, the official answer is no. We don't have any current plans right now to revisit those. There's nothing on the books, but never say never. I love Gods of the Fall. Shauna loves Predation. Dennis loves Unmasked, but he's gone on to other things. So
that's also another commonly asked question on our server, whether those books will be revisited.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, never say never.
I was just about to say that we might need to tap Dean on the shoulder to write the Unmasked Revisitation.
Hey, just let me know.
Your catalog for Monte Cook Games is pretty extensive. Gods of the Fall, The Strange, Jade Colossus, Worlds Numberless and Strange, woo-hoo, just to name a few. But come on, Bruce, you could tell us. We won't tell anybody. Do you have a personal favorite?
Personal favorite? I don't have any favorites in anything. I have things I really like. No, I can't pick a single one. Right? Strange is what brought me in. Well, I spent so much time on that. Gods of the Fall, oh my gosh, But pretty much whatever I'm working on, Arcana of the Ancients was really fun, but Jade Colossus was, no, it's.
He's trying to rationalize these shirts, but then this one has and this one has.
You know what? And that, to me, that's just another testament to just how good you are at what you do, Bruce. That's it's awesome when you can really feel that way about your work. You can find the honey, you can find the milk and honey in each piece. There's always something that goes, you know what? Oh, but look at that, and then look at this. And I think we all do the same thing, because even when we talk about the books, our favorites, we all could appreciate each other's favorite book so deeply. So, yeah.
But
So one of you or someone, a couple of people had asked me a little while ago was my favorite book, and I actually tried to say like, well, what are 10 books I really love? For not
Right.
just my MCG catalog, but my entire career. I tried to answer that. I wrote a blog post on it. It might be it's either my most recent or second most recent blog post, which is top 10 books as selected by their author. So if you go to brucecordell.com, you should be able to see that blog post and my thoughts and my curation of why I think those are good, stand up in my mind.
but we'll
Out of curiosity, before you step into that, Al, just real quick though, you talk about because I'm gonna go check it out definitely. But just out of curiosity, was Tangents on there?
Should have been.
Could have been.
That's one of my favorite books that you wrote. So I really enjoyed. I love the alternative world. So it was like really good stuff to have.
But
Thank you.
But yeah, for those interested in the post, we'll definitely be sure to link it in the description down below for viewers who want to check out that list, and also the rest of his site or rest of Bruce's site. But yeah, I think that wraps up our regular old questions. So thank you, and that brings us on to our very tough soul searching questions. We always get those rapid fire questions going, and they really search your soul. But yeah, basic premise. We'll give you an or question and pick one of the two things. So yeah, let's get the ball rolling. So do you prefer being a player or a GM?
I think that I often am a player, but when I have the opportunity to GM, it's fantastic. When I playtest the stuff around here, I usually have a great time. I was able to I was able to play a game of The Strange at Gen Con, the very last session. So we lost a player and GM, so I jumped in and oh my god, it was great. We played Game of Screams from the last Instant Adventures for The Strange.
Awesome.
I play a lot more though.
All right. Well, pull punches or TPK?
I used to be TPK, now I'm pull punches.
Definitely feel that.
I've evolved. I just want to say the name of it was Sam DeLeve, and who was the other person that I spoke with, Eric Campbell and Sam DeLeve from Calypso 6 and Shield of Tomorrow. Sorry.
I don't know who big
I was thinking Sam, but then I was like, is it Sam? Oh, I didn't want to get it wrong, but sorry about that. I doubt they'll see this, but if they do, I apologize, Sam. Not spitting your name out immediately. Anyway, back to your question.
Online or in-person gaming?
In person.
Announce the difficulty number or keep it a secret?
Secret.
Ooh, keep it secret.
Salty or sweet snacks at the table?
Used to be salty. Now it's nothing.
Oh.
Trying to cut out all the carbs.
Oh man, that's rough. Okay.
It's rough because everyone else keeps bringing snacks.
Yeah, no, you have to watch them. RP or combat?
Don't make me pick between those two.
So you could put
RP during combat.
Nice.
You could put the Dean answer that we removed, a good mix of both.
Oh boy.
No, I like what he said though. He said, RP while doing combat.
Yeah.
A plus answer if I say so. But next one is PDFs or physical books?
They both have their place. Sorry. Physical books. By a hair's breadth. if I had to choose, right?
Yeah.
You're like, well, you're gonna get one or the other. Okay, physical book, right? Because
Good answer.
physical space.
Well, PDFs have been growing on me immensely, but I still love my physical books.
I love PDFs. I just smidge more for physical.
Pen and paper, notes, or digital?
Oh man, I just played a whole 2.5 years of Invisible Sun where I had all electronic. But now we're starting a new Invisible Sun, and I just decided I'm going to try something different to go with that character, right? So this character is going to have a different feel, so I want to take notes differently to help me get into that character. So right now it's pen and paper.
Good answer.
That's awesome. Pre-written adventures or original content?
Well, for me, it's one and the same.
Exactly.
Oh boy. Oh, that's a good one.
That was like the perfect answer.
Yeah, go wrong with that.
I was going to say, well, like, how can I answer that?
Oh man, but
I'm not usually that cocky, by the way, so I feel like I need to roll that back a little.
That wasn't cocky. That was hilarious.
that was very good. Ooh.
And be fitting.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. You completed our rapid fires. You survived. Woo, with a great wrap up to the questions. Oh, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on, speaking with us. It's been a pleasure. Getting a little bit of insight into your world, into your mind, and into your life. But for our viewers out there, how can they reach you online? I know you mentioned you have a blog site, is it like Twitter, whatever. However else can people reach you?
I do have a blog. I post on that occasionally. Twitter is kind of the only social media that I keep up on a fairly regular basis. I post some pictures to Instagram, but those are just like, why? Here's a picture of me doing this. Someone else doing something else, right? So Twitter is kind of where, but even there, I'm kind of falling off the Twitter bandwagon too. But Twitter for now.
Gotcha. All right, awesome. So we'll be sure to link those, your Twitter and your blog down below, and specifically that post about your top 10 books. Why you like each over the other. But yeah, thank you so much again for being on. Thank you everyone out there for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that little notification bell so get notifications as to when we post videos. And any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I'll go first. I had one quick question that was asked today. Is there a release date for Stars on Fire anytime soon? Because a lot of the members were asking today.
That is a good question, because I think today it went on pre-order, which means it's coming out November. It's coming out in November. That's next month, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So it'll probably come out nearer the end of November than the beginning, but that's when it'll come out. And of course, backers will get fulfilled before it actually is before actual people who didn't back it order it and get it. But so yeah, next month.
So that's like 2/3 of our server, because most of us are backers.
Well, thank you guys for being big supporters that you backed that product. I appreciate it. But obviously you guys are supporters of MCG. So I also appreciate that.
Only final thoughts I have, Ms. Bruce, is just I want to say again, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for such a massive, broad body of work that has been inspirational, both as for me as a writer, but also as a game master. I've been in this hobby, probably as long as you have. So, yeah, keep up the great work, man. Thanks for being on our show.
Yep. Full hard agree on that one. And again, thank you all for watching. Thank you again, Bruce, for coming on. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.